All right, let's pray. Lord, we're thankful for the privilege we have to be in Hebrew class today. I pray that you'd open our eyes to all the wondrous things in your law. Help local and distant students to do well in final exams and translation tests on Genesis 1. Pray you be with us in the teaching of the Word of God as we are going through the passage here in Genesis, and that it would strengthen us spiritually and help us to grow in our knowledge and our both intellectual and experiential of you as our God. And we pray this for Jesus' sake. Amen. Okay, well, you probably, just because there wasn't any new translation, do you have any homework questions?
No.
No. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and translate Genesis 1:17 here. See how far we can get. This very exciting and important passage of Scripture. It's a little bit low. Right after verse 16.
Just real quick, are you going to have anyone write? Are you going to have them write on the board?
I might.
I'd like to go and pick up my headphones, but right now I have just around your head, so I don't.
Okay, why don't you go get them and come back, and I won't write on the board until after you come back. Are we still going?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I have it, but I apparently didn't write it out.
Uh-oh.
Like, I have it translated word by word, but I didn't write it out to make it a sentence.
Uh-oh, well, let's hear. Why don't you read it in Hebrew, and we'll see what can be done here.
Oh, yeah.
Hebrew? Hebrew? What? What does that have to do with this class?
Okay. Vayithen Otham Elohim Birkiah Hashamayim
Hashamayim.
Hashamayim La Ha'ir El Ha'aretz.
Tov. And of course, we're talking about the sun, the greater light and the lesser light, and the stars here. So, okay, what does that mean?
It would mean, oh, maybe it is here. And God gave them in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth. That's the end of the verse.
Good place to stop right there.
Okay.
If you gave additional translation after that for verse 17, that would be interesting. So, okay, what is the parsing of Yitain?
Yitain. The parson would be, while conversive, call imperfect 3ms. Yitain.
Yeah, and what's it lexical form?
Nathan.
Sure. And what does Nathan mean?
To give.
Good. So yeah, cal, wow, consecutive, 3ms imperfect from Nathan to give. Yeah. And it's a very common verb. I think it translates to set them in the firmament of heaven, and what give is fine. Give is like what you think of as the first thing to say for that word. So you can see, if you just look at that, if you didn't know that it was it easy to figure out it was from Nathan?
Yeah.
Because you knew the parsing?
Yeah.
Now without it, you can see like there's no noon there. It could be a little bit discombobulating, but as if you memorize that form, hey. So okay, so God set them. Elohim, of course, is a subject of Vayatain. God set them, Otham. Berkiah is at firmament, Hashemayim. Laha'ir, I think I gave you the parsing for that. So it's a Hiphil infinitive construct from or, and what does or mean?
Light.
What is it?
Light.
Yeah, to light, to be light, and Hiphil to give light, to cause there to be light upon the earth. All right, Tov mode. Any questions about the translation of verse 17?
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay. Yeah, that was it's a good, easy one to start on. So let's go ahead and translate verse 18 then. By the way, one thing you can see is that a sentence doesn't necessarily have to end at the sof pasuk, because here the sentence is continuing from verse 17.
So in Hebrew, what is the concept of the sof pasuk beyond just dividing verses, and why do they?
Basically, it's just dividing the verses. Yeah.
Why do they divide verses in the middle of a sentence? I mean, I could see Paul when he's writing 13 verses with one sentence.
Yeah, it's. I don't know if I can give a. Verse 18 is a longer verse. It would be kind of long to have the whole thing as one. I don't know if I can give you the exact reason why every single verse is divided exactly the way it is. But if you want more information just in general, you can read Weeks. But I wouldn't recommend worrying about Weeks until you get Lambda down. But he has 2 treatises on the accents, and you can find out lots and lots about them, more than you. Well, I wouldn't say more than you want to know, because it's in God's Word, so it's good, worth knowing. But yeah, I don't know if I have an answer for every single verse division. The verse divisions, like I said, doesn't always have to mean the end of a sentence at the end of the verse, and the value of the accents as pausal markers is relative. So, the Athanac is stronger than a lesser one, but they don't always have to be a big pause. It depends on a lot of factors. It could be a not especially significant one.
So do they have actually like a mark that would be for the end of a sentence?
Other than the Saluk and the Sof Pasuk, no, not really. But you can see here that it's continuing from what's before with a wow,
Yeah.
on the, so
Okay.
it's really not that hard to tell.
All right, verse 18. Limshol
Good. Wolim Shol.
Bayom Wu Belela Wu Lehave Deal
Ula Havdil.
Ulahav Deal Bain Haor Wu Bain Hech Shek
Hachoshek.
Hechoshek Wayer Elohim Ki Tov.
Good. And actually, your pronunciation isn't too bad. I mean, it's a little bit slow sometimes, but it's not too bad. I've definitely seen worse. So. Okay, what does that mean?
That would mean, and to rule in the day and in the night, and for dividing between the light and between the dark. And God saw that it was good.
Okay. And it was, you have that in brackets or italics or something?
Well, I actually don't, but it would be implied.
Yeah, those are implied words. Good. And they are implied, but good to bracket them or something. All right, can you give me the parsing of Walim Shoal?
Walim Shoal is a vowel consecutive prefixed with a la. The root is mashale, a verb, kale perfect verb, 3ms, infinite construct.
It's an infinitive construct, and that's good. Since it's infinitive construct, it's not perfect 3ms. Those are mutually exclusive categories. So it's just infinitive. It's just cal infinitive construct is what it is. So it's not a perfect 3ms, but it is an infinitive construct.
Okay.
So, and that's good to clarify. And because it's infinitive construct, it's and to rule, especially with a lamed, being two. So and to rule. And mashal is to rule, of course. How about, by the way, notice in verse 17 you had laha'ir, to give light. And here you have or. Of course, you can see they're similar forms, light and the noun light and the verb to be light. How about wayar? What's wayar?
Wayar is, parsing it,
Yes, please.
would be a vowel conversive of ra'a, verb imperfect, kale imperfect, 3ms, and he saw.
Yeah, and in the parsing you do want to give the lexical form too. What's the lexical form?
Ra'a.
Good, ra'a, which means to see. Good. And it's apocryphated with a vowel conversive on it. You can see the hay is dropped off, shortened. Wayar. I think the translation wasn't too bad. Oftentimes you can see how it repeats the between the this and between the that, and the word between is mentioned both times. That's more frequent in Hebrew than in English, where it will repeat the preposition like that. Or the particle, actually.
Should we still translate it even?
Yeah, translate. Because I mean, we're trying to replicate as what's there. So if the word's in there, yeah, stick it in there. So, okay, super. Can you translate the Masoretic note on verse 18? One negative about like a computer software program is they typically don't have. They really ought to get them, but they don't actually usually have these notes. So
do you usually read off the computer, or?
I usually read my physical Bible,
Okay.
and yeah, so it's easy to read. I like the physical Bible. I guess I'm just not that high tech yet. Okay, what does that note say?
The first one. U have deal, and for the dividing, Yoriko Matheg, which is Jericho provided with Metheg.
Yeah, not too bad. I'm trying to read it with even the note without the vowels in there. Yeah, what the note means is that in Codex Jericho it has a metheg. So the word ula havdil, which of course is the word in the text that has a little circle over it, it just is letting you know that Codex Jericho has a metheg on that word, which in the text itself, notice that it does have a metheg as well. So the received text in the text there has the metheg, and then he's just telling you Codex Jericho has one too, which is different from in verse 15. In verse 15, the actual text did not have a metheg, but Codex Jericho did. So, all right, a little bit of information here. On each of the first 3 days of the creation, God named some new aspect of the creation. So he was naming things, and on days 5 and 6, that's replaced by acts of blessing. So he's naming, 5 and 6 he's blessing. On day 4, he doesn't either name or bless, which is the day we're talking about here, of course. possibly for two purposes. One, functional subordination of the luminaries themselves. He gave names to the night and the day, but he didn't name them specifically. So they're just given this function that before their creation, the light that he already had was making things light up anyway. So he had already shown his sovereignty over the day and the night by naming day and night on day one. And also the term luminary itself for them shows their functional aspect. They're here to give light. So these divinely created lights are certainly not objects of worship. They're servants of God with the task of lighting up the earth. So, and that would be, I think, understood by the readers of this. Any questions about verse 18?
Nope.
No? Okay. Let's go ahead and translate verse 19 then.
Wayahi Erev, Wayahi Boker, Yom Ravi'i.
All right.
And it was evening, and it was morning, fourth day.
All right. It was evening, it was morning, day 4. Yom Ravi'i. Any questions on the translation of that verse?
Not really. Is there a significant difference to say day 4 or fourth day?
Not too much. I have a question. There's on days 6 and 7. There's a little bit different the way that they're put, and so I'll point that out when we get there. But no, there isn't really. A fourth day or day 4 would both be fine. Acceptable translation. I'm going to read you a quote. It's a nice quote here. Sometimes people say that they cannot believe that if there is a God, he would take interest in such a tiny speck of reality called humanity on planet Earth. The universe, they say, is so vast, it makes man utterly insignificant. Why would God have bothered to create such a microscopic speck called the Earth and humanity, and then get involved with us? Beneath this question is a fundamental failure to see what the universe is about. It is about the greatness of God, not the significance of man. God made man small and the universe big to say something about himself. And he says it for us to learn and enjoy, namely that he is infinitely great and powerful and wise and beautiful. The more the Hubble telescope sends back to us about the unfathomable depths of space, the more we should stand in awe of God. The disproportion between us and the universe is a parable about the disproportion between us and God, and it is an understatement. But the point is not to nullify us, but to glorify him. I thought that was a nice quote. So good way to end our thoughts on the fourth day. Anything else you want to say about the verse 19?
No.
All right, well, let's go to verse 20. We're just speeding along here. I don't know how long that will continue, but at least right now we're speeding along.
Okay, verse 20. Wayomer Elohim Yishratzu Hameim Sheretz Nefesh Chaya Waof Yaofeif El Haaretz El Paneh Rakia Hashamayim.
All right, what does that mean? You brought a lot of papers there.
And God said, let the waters swarm with swarming things, animated as living things, and flying creatures let fly about over the earth upon the face of the firmament of the heavens.
Okay. A little bumpy, but not too bad. What's Wayomer?
Wayomer is, and he said.
Sure. What's the parsing?
The parsing. Is a vowel conversive of amer, the verb kal, imperfect, 3ms.
Good. And means to say. So when God said, Yish Ritsu. What is Yish Ritsu? Interesting word.
Let swarm, a verb kal, imperfect, 3m plural of sharats,
Which you said means to swarm.
to swarm.
Okay. And how did you translate it?
Let swarm.
So it sounds like a command. Why did you translate like a command?
I suppose. I don't know.
Is there another form that is very much related to?
Jussive?
Yeah, the jussive, yeah.
Jussive.
So you translate it like a jussive, and I think really it is a jussive. So, so let swarm or bring forth abundantly is fine. So let the waters swarm with sherets. And what is sherets?
Sherets is a noun, masculine noun, a collective of swarming things. And BDB said swarming things aquatic, at least in this context being in water.
Sure, yeah, the mayim kind of. So here are the swarming things that are swarming in the waters. And it is masculine, it's singular, it's actually construct with nephesh here. And the nephesh is absolute, as is chaya. What's the parsing of chaya? That's a word that looks like, it's getting a little confusing, but what is it? What is that?
It's a feminine noun of chaya.
It does look, this, I think on one of the pages in Lambden, he gives you the difference between the adjective, the verb, and the noun for life, because they all look the same. Does that ring a bell to you at all?
I do, yes.
But I don't know what page it is. This is actually the adjective, the feminine singular adjective, che. But they're confusing though. They look similar. I don't know what page that's on, but it's somewhere. Well, if you find it, let me know where it is. Well, I think we'll survive this thing. Look in the back at the glossary. Well, I don't know where it is, but it's there somewhere. But this is the feminine singular adjective, che. And it has the comate ending because it agrees with nephesh, which is, well, nephesh can be either masculine or feminine, but in this case it's feminine singular here, adjective modifying nefesh. Yeah. Well, if you find, let me know. We'll survive without finding it, but it is in there somewhere, and I remember that. But yeah, so adjective modifying nefesh, and nefesh is absolute sheret's construct. O for the birds, though probably anything that flies around like a bat could very possibly be considered an oaf also. Ya'ofef, what is the parsing for Ya'ofef?
I think you gave us this one.
I did, but I didn't give you the I didn't tell you what the lexical form meant.
It is, I can't read my writing, but it says polel. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yep, polel.
Okay, I can't read.
Something you don't know anything about yet.
Yeah, polel, imperfect 3ms, Joseph.
Yeah, it's adjustive. So let fly. Oh, I didn't ask you. From oaf is the lexical form, and then to fly. So, and let fowl fly. Let birds fly upon or above the eretz. How did you translate the last part? The al panei rakia hashemayim.
How did I translate it? Upon the face of the firmament of the heavens.
Okay, it's not too bad. Oh, you know what? Yeah, guess what? You know, neither of us could find where the He is. I actually gave it to you in the notes. It said in Genesis 1:20, Pars Chaya, compare page 79, paragraph 80 of Lambden. So it's right there on page 79. So. The confusing thing is this form is exactly the same, even though it's a feminine singular adjective, it's exactly the same as the noun. If you look there on page 79, which is probably why you said it was the noun. But if you go back to paragraph 22, you can see on page 13, paragraph 22, see the forms of the adjective. Take a look at the forms of the adjective of che, living there.
Singular feminine?
Yeah, so there you can see the singular feminine is chaya. Then you have che, masculine singular, chaya, feminine singular, chayim, masculine plural, chayoth, feminine plural. So the noun and the feminine singular adjective look exactly the same. But here, contextually, the adjective makes a whole lot more sense than a noun. So it makes sense for it to be living souls, or living soul, singular, where chaya is modifying nefesh, soul or creature. All right. Any translation questions before we ask the interesting question here in verse 20 about animals and souls?
No, that would probably orientate around my question.
Okay, all right. Well, let's ask the question here. Does Genesis 1:20 teach that animals have a soul? Does the use of the word soul distinguish man from the animals? What does Genesis teach that it is the difference between mankind, the animal kinds, and the plants? Compare the other texts with nefesh chaya in the Old Testament, and they give you all the text there. For a text that are not going to be translated this semester, you can use English translations, interlinears, or whatever tools you wish to figure out what the Hebrew text is saying. So, this nephesh here, I'm going to change my chair out too, because I'm going to try to sit in that chair. So what do you think? Do animals have souls?
So what I wrote, and I translated it as animated,
Okay, all right.
which is probably the most undogmatic and neutral position I could present.
Okay. So
But I also know that the Latin word for soul utilizes that root for animation.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of where I went that route. But I wrote here, Ezekiel identifies all living things that move as nefesh hayah. This included fish, while in Genesis 9:10, the covenant with man, Noah, and all living creatures with him on the ark. But verse 16 remarks upon the earth. Genesis 1 includes birds, specifying what reproduces. Chapter 2 indicates what breathes, but can't exclude fish. Perhaps what moves or is animated is appropriate. Ecclesiastes 3:21 indicates the spiritual essence of animals, so they must have a soul. It appears being made in God's image is an eternal soul, contrast to an animal's, but plants have no soul.
Okay, so so do animals have souls?
My answer would be yes.
Yes, okay. Wow, but I thought Genesis 2:7 says man became a living soul, and that's what makes him different than the animals.
I think what makes them different is more specifically the image of God.
Oh, okay, image of God. When did you come to that conclusion?
I don't know, apparently when I wrote this answer.
Really? Okay.
I never really studied it out too far beyond the difference between man and animal and then animals and plants.
Have you heard people say the difference is that man has a soul, animals don't?
I probably have heard it, but didn't really take much note to it.
Yeah, that's a pretty common position. How about plants? If animals have souls, do plants have souls?
They were never indicated with a nefesh hayah.
Okay.
They seem to be complex, multiplying entities.
Plants?
Yeah.
They are complex and do multiple. Okay, all right. Wow. What do you think about that frog?
He doesn't have a soul.
Because he's stuffed, yeah. Yeah, stuffed animals, I think, might be different. All right, well, does that mean that every frog that dies will be either in heaven or in hell?
No.
No? But the dogs. Surely the pet dog.
All dogs go to heaven.
Okay, all right.
Cats go to hell, though.
Really? Oh, wow. I see. Yeah. Yeah, the word soul does not distinguish man from the animals. It is the image of God. It's the thing that distinguishes man from the animals. The phrase here in Genesis 1 for the animals as nefesh hayah is exactly the same as in Genesis 2:7 for man. In fact, Genesis 2:7 is the only passage where it specifically is man that's nefesh hayah. So here are the swarming things. The water creatures are called nefesh hayah, living souls. Verse 24, the land animals are. In 9:10, the birds and land animals are. In 9:16, both man and the animals. So animate creation, really everything that has the breath of life would have a living soul. So does not distinguish man from the animals, the nefesh. No basis for that. And what it does distinguish, the nefesh distinguishes what is biblically alive versus what is biblically speaking not alive. So that's why the nefesh is why the animals didn't die before the fall, but you still eat plants. Because the plants don't have nefesh. They're not, biblically speaking, they're not alive in the sense that animals are. So you can have no death and still eat salad, and the lettuce is going to be fine with that. How about, I don't think I asked you this, but the ruach too, the word for spirit or breath, is employed for the animals in Genesis 6:17 and 7:15-22, breath of life. So that animals are said to have a ruach as well, and ruach is also used for part of man, like in Genesis 41:8, 45:27, 26:35. And both animals and men are both said to have a body also. Like in 47:18, people have bodies. Judges 14:8-9, animals have bodies. The New Testament words as well. The words for suke, soul, is used for animals in Revelation 8:9 and 16:3, like with the sea turned into blood, all the living souls in the sea. And it's used for people too, soul, which shall profit man if he loses soul. Pneuma is used for people, but not for animals in the New Testament, but that may simply be because there aren't tons and tons of animals where it would come up. In the Greek LXX, the verses where animals have ruach, spirit, we do have pneuma used for the animals, like Genesis 6:17 and 7:15. So the specific terms for body and soul and spirit don't distinguish man from the animals, but it is the image of God, which I think we're going to see later in 126. Now, since man is in the image of God, you would also expect his body and his soul and his spirit to be different than the animals. So you might say that man has an eternal soul, an eternal spirit, while the animals don't, but that isn't the fundamental difference. The fundamental difference is the image of God, and that stuff is just a consequence of man being in the image of God. And really, we have an eternal body too. We're either going to be in heaven, or we're going to have a real body in heaven or a corruptible body in the lake of fire. People will. So even we have an eternal body too, but obviously animals have bodies. So that would be the biblical distinction. Nephesh distinguishes what's alive from what's not alive, and what distinguishes man from the animals is the image of God. So how that fits in the sort of progress here of the account is basically animals have a certain kind of consciousness. It's not the same as human consciousness, but your dog can even feel sad or whatever. It eats what it's not supposed to. You say, bad dog. It's like, so they have a certain kind of consciousness, while the plants don't. You can speak to the plants, tell them that they're bad, and they don't care. So you have the physical elements of the universe on the first day, and then here we have consciousness introduced, kind of, on this day. And that's another, here on day 5, notice we have in verse 20 here, well, actually, starting at verse 21, which we haven't got to yet. Verse 20, you have bara again. And verse 21 gives you only the second time we have bara create. We had it in the back before, and here we have bara again, because here we have the introduction of another order of magnitude of things in the creation. So he created, and then he made from what he had already created, and here we have the introduction of consciousness into the realm of creation, not just inanimate objects. So, and then these conscious beings get the first specific statement of blessing. And bara will appear after in 121, it's going to appear in 127 for the creation of mankind. So the universe created, beings with consciousness created, man created, and then it appears at the end of the summary statement. So any questions about that?
Probably not relevant to the text here.
No?
But it makes my mind swarm with concepts of trichotomy and...
Swarm?
Yes.
Swarming things? Trichotomy, dichotomy,
That's
all
the
that stuff.
closest I can make it relate to the text.
Oh, yeah. Swarming. Some of the swarming things are things like the fish are in schools, stuff like that. I think that if you look at the terms for soul and spirit, there's a lot of overlap. So I wouldn't sharply divide them. I think you can over-divide them. But they do seem to have certain elements of distinction and emphasis at least. So whatever you want to call that, you can call it. In a certain sense, man is a unitary being. We're one being. In a certain sense, we are dipartite. We have a spiritual side and a physical side. And I don't think soul and spirit are exactly identical. I think there's something of a distinction. So in that sense, maybe 3. So that's how I would take it anyway. But the way I actually came to my view on that is I looked up all the instances of nephesh. I looked up all the instances of those words, the word for soul, word for spirit, and it took a long time because there's a lot of them. Yeah. But that's how I did it and just classified them. So now in this verse, can you read your translation of verse 20 one more time?
And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarming things, animated as living things, and flying creatures let fly about over the earth upon the face of the firmament of the heavens."
Okay. I think it wasn't that, you kind of go a little bit either way with that, but there's a difference. The King James says, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly." So there the waters are bringing forth the swarming things and the fowls. The LXX says something similar to the King James. "And God shall let the waters bring forth creeping things among living creatures and birds flying on the earth." Similarly, the Latin Vulgate also does that. "And God also said, Let the waters bring forth the creeping things having life, and the fowl that may fly over the earth." While most modern versions have it a bit different. They say, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly." So they don't have the birds coming from the water. Or the NASV says, NASV, "Let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth." So the difference in the King James has, "Let the waters bring forth the moving creatures that have life, and fowl that may fly." So the waters are bringing forth both under the command of God, while the modern versions don't. And the NKJV also actually doesn't follow the King James here. It's not just updating the King James language. The NKJV does what the modern versions do, and says, "Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth." So it's not just following the King James here. Is there a basis for saying what the King James does and the LXX and the Latin Vulgate in having the waters kind of be for both of them? Well, I believe that there is. And I'm going to read you a quote from Lang's commentary on Genesis here. He said, "The Hebrew words wa'of ya'ofef, as they stand connected, cannot, we think, be properly rendered in any other way than as we find it in our English version," by which he means the King James. "And birds that fly, and in all the ancient versions, LXX, Petina, Peton, Nimana, Vulgate, etc. The Syriac, exactly like the Hebrew in its construction, can have but one possible sense: birds that fly." So Luther's translation, Arabic, and so on. "The idiom of the Hebrew seems fixed, requiring us in such a case to regard the future as descriptive, like participle or an adjective. In the Arabic, the corresponding usage is so established as to put any other translation out of the question. It occurs frequently in the Quran with the same subject, and in just such as a connection as we have it here. The other rendering, the one the modern versions have, 'and let birds fly,' would require a different order of the words. Wa ya'ofef ha'of, just as before, yis ritsu hamayim, let the waters swarm. The more modern rendering has come from the fear of what would seem gross naturalism, namely the coming of the birds from the water. But we know nothing here except as we are taught," namely by God, of course. "There's nothing more incredible in such an eduction, coming from the water, than there would be in affirming it of any other form of that unknown and wonderful thing we call life." So it looks like the Hebrew actually supports the translation of the King James, where both God, underneath the command of God, the waters bring forth the creeping things and the birds as well, versus the way the modern versions and the NKJV do it. So probably, at the stage that we're at here, first semester Hebrew, it would be, don't even worry about it. It'd be kind of like a bit over your head there, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Another thing worth mentioning, oaf is properly translated as birds or fowl, but I think I said it would include all the creatures that fly. So something like a bat would count.
Yeah, I put flying creatures.
Yeah, flying creatures is fine. Flying creatures is fine.
BDB 733, page 733, even included insects.
Yeah, and they do fly. Yeah, they swarm too. don't they? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen fly swarm.
Yeah, swarms of flies. Yep. The difference between the cal and the polale, you had the oaf, ya-ofaith, and ya-ofaith is polale, not cal. It's paranomasia, where you have the words, the noun and the verb, same, and the root here. And the root connotes movement resembling and corresponding to swarming, the term used of living creatures inhabiting the water. So the flying creatures with the polale kind of emphasizes them flying hither and thither in all directions. So they're all flying around, all the flying critters. So the word for swarm, the sherets and the sharats, the creep and the swarm, it's applied without regard to size to those animals which congregate together in great numbers and move about among one another. So it doesn't have to necessarily only be tiny things. It could be flocks of geese or whatever that are flying together, swarming. So anything that congregates together in great numbers and they move about together would be counted here. So that's interesting there. Any further questions on verse 20?
I still don't understand how it gets to bringing forth, but
Swarm versus bring forth, you're saying for translation?
yeah.
Well, swarm and bring forth abundantly, I think the point is that with the translation of bring forth abundantly is that there's a lot of them. That's the swarm idea. I think the Lexica says swarm. Of course, the Lexica does say swarm. But I think bring forth would be fine in terms of the abundance of them as the idea. But there's nothing wrong with swarm. Swarm is a perfectly acceptable translation. The thing that I was talking about with the difference between the authorized version and the other ones was whether the birds are also kind of originating from the water underneath God's command, or they're just kind of coming independently. So in other words, whether the verb sharats governs both the sheretz, nefesh chaya, and the oaf. In other words, let the waters swarm with the the swarming creatures, and also the fowl that are flying about. That was the connection there. So
That much I get. I just don't understand how the bring forth comes forth.
the bring forth comes forth. Okay, yeah. Okay, well, that's fine.
Unless it's some idiomatic concept I have no clue of.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to look at the etymology of sharats to see, if there's something to that there. All right, well, let's take a break, and we'll do verse 21 after the break here.
Okay.
For the thing that bring forth abundantly, I didn't see much in BDB or Kohler Baumgartner about that, but in the New National Dictionary of Old Testament Theology and Exegesis, in there it talks about, for sharats, it says the meaning teem or breed abundantly is delineated more specific in Genesis 8:17. So like bring forth abundantly, breed abundantly, in there, the NIDOTT, New National Dictionary of Old Testament Theology Exegesis, gives a basis for that. And actually, so does the Dictionary of Classical Hebrew, which is both biblical, and it looks at all the ancient Hebrew texts like Qumran and all those guys. So that's in there too. And there was one, also Gesenius' Hebrew lexicon said, let me get that back up again. Says on there, to abound, sun is a place, earth or sea, is said to creep with creeping things, i.e. to abound in them, followed by accusatives. As the sea with aquatic creatures, Genesis 1:20-21. So the bring forth abundantly idea is actually not just pulled out of thin air. You actually have some support in the lexicon for that. I'm not saying creep is wrong. Creep is totally fine, but there was a basis for the way they did it in the King James too. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and translate verse 21. It's right after verse 20, so it'd be a reasonable place to go.
I was just kind of interested in that because the implications of it being created out of the water compared to they're just there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's interesting. I mean, obviously, we don't. Since this, it's a divine fiat either way. It's just, it's interesting how God often uses different instrumentalities to do things.
Yeah.
So.
Because it is a big difference of the stars just appeared because He created them, bing, bang, boom, and then the fish and stuff were created out of the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting. Trying to think now, in an evolutionary system, the birds came from the land animals, right?
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs?
Yep.
And the dinosaurs came from, and dinosaurs are land animals, right?
Yep.
So here it doesn't fit again, because here you have the, even if you wanted to somehow spiritualize into something, you'd have the birds coming from the water where the sea creatures are just made, and there are no land creatures yet. So, oh well. All right, well, let's see verse 21 here.
Let me read it in Hebrew.
Yes, that'd be great.
Vayivra.
You know, it's a shorter I sound because it's a closed syllable.
Okay.
Vayivra, actually.
Vayivra Elohim eth had teninim. Hagadolim wa'eth kal nefesh ha-chaya ha-romeseth Asher Sharatsu Hamayim Laminehem Wa'eth Kalof Kanaf Laminehu Where Elohim Kitov.
Retranslate just hold on for a second. I'm just checking something. Oh, look at that. My computer program, there's on Sharatsu, the Asher Sharatsu Hamayim, the text, there's no metheg underneath the sheen, but there is in the physical Bible here. And I suspect, because that's just a third column plural, perfect, that they just accidentally didn't put it in 121. Like they just, I mean, you could see Hebrew, it could be a pain typographically to get all these little fitsy things in. So I think that, I don't think it's like a textual, I highly doubt it's a textual variant there. I think it's just, but looking at the computer, that looks like a comments on tooth, not a comments, but that's a third column plural. And physical text has it right. So anyway, okay. What is the translation of this?
And God created the large sea monsters and each animated living thing, moving things that swarm the waters toward their kind, and every winged bird toward their kind. And God saw that it was good.
All right. Yeah, you could say with the lamed, where you said toward its kind, there's a lot of, I don't remember which one of the instances of if you look up lamed in the lexicon, there's a lot of definitions, of course, because it's a very common preposition, but like, according to its kind is the idea, that's what it is. I'm not going to say you're wrong for saying toward, because lamed can be translated a lot of, probably to its kind would be superior to towards its kind, because that sounds like maybe they're like approaching the kind, but they haven't got there yet. But the idea is that they brought them forth, each one to its kind, each one according to its kind, is the idea.
The reason I used the word toward, because I thought it allowed a variation within a kind.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't think of toward its kindness and the way I see how you said it, and that actually makes me think, oh, that was a bad word to use.
Yeah, according to, in other words, he made them each, they each had their own separate kind. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know how many they made.
I used the word thinking it was good to avoid fixity of species concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the the kind is the determining thing here, and but according to its kind, I think would be good. To its kind, but probably toward isn't the best. But Wayivra, we've had that before, but what's the parsing for Wayivra?
Is a well-conversive, imperfect, 3ms, apocryphated. No, it's not. Never mind.
No, it's not apocryphated.
He created.
Yeah, good.
Bara.
From bara, to create. God created. I think I have a question about the Tananim, and so I'll ask about them. Do I have a question about the Tananim? I'm going to say something about the Tananim a little bit later. Let's see here. I don't know. Maybe I don't have a question about them. Do I not have a question about the Tananim?
I don't know. Is that your question?
Yeah, it looks like I don't. I just had a accent question. Okay, so Tananim. What are Tananim?
BDB said serpent, dragon, sea monster. And so I thought sea monster was kind of more of a all-abrasive concept of these large creatures in the sea.
All right. Large creatures in the sea.
So it would fit from whales, which we classify as mammals, down to dinosaurs, which we usually would think of as reptiles of some sort.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether they were warm-blooded or cold-blooded. Tananim could be a plural of tan, which is another type of critter. But that's some of the lexica dispute that, but it sure looks like a plural. So this would be the plural would be for a bigger type of creature. And I think it would include the dinosaurs. Now, in 1611, too, when the King James says whales, now, in 1611, even the word whale didn't have the kind of specificity that it does now, like whales are warm-blooded versus sharks are cold-blooded versus blah. It was basically a large sea critter. Even like if you read Moby Dick. So just to mention that, like, was it the whales or in the Bible, like, was Jonah swallowed by a whale? Was it a warm-blooded if it's a whale, or was it a great fish? What's it? We can figure out which one it was, or at least speculate based upon looking at different kinds of critters and see what would work. But using the English word whale and setting against fish is kind of reading a modern distinction between the two words back into the biblical translation that was not really present at the time. Now here the Tananim are especially big, so we have big Tananim. So these guys must have been pretty significant. And they were mentioned first, too. So yeah, I will say something about that a little bit. So here the Tananim, the great Tananim are mentioned first. And then he said, Wa'eth nefesh chaya haromeseth. What is haromeseth?
Is article prefix to remes, and it's a noun masculine. I don't have it written here, but is it a construct with the tau at the end?
Not a bad guess. It's actually the feminine participle.
Okay.
So remember kothev, kotheveth, kothavim, kothavoth. So just like kotheveth, here we have romeseth. So it's a cal feminine singular participle from remes. And what does remes mean?
Creeping things or moving things.
Yeah, so the noun would be like creeping things. Here would be the verb remes would be to creep or crawl. So every living soul or living creature, and then ha romeseth, every living creature that crawls. So would be what it would be, crawls or creeps. And so here we have the moving or crawling or creeping critters. Well, that's very alliterated. That swarm in the waters, asher sharatzu hamayim. And sharatz is like in the last verse. That's a Calperfect 3 CP. And then Yar, we've seen Yar before. But what is Wayar? Wayar Elohim Kitov.
Wayar is a wow conversive of ra'ah, a verb call, imperfect, 3ms, apocapated.
And what's the lexical form? What does it mean?
Ra'ah, to see.
Good, yeah. All right, and the minehu and the minehem is from mean, the word kind, and then the ehu is a 3ms suffix, and the leminehem is a 3mp suffix. Because oaf is a collective noun, bird, while you have a plural form. So that was a little bit more of a challenging translation. Any questions about the translation of verse 21?
No, I don't think so.
Oh yeah, and I gave you the that note on the ehu and the leminehem in the text. I think I did, didn't I? At least in the most, I don't know if I gave it in the earlier printed out one, but in the one I sent, I mentioned that concerning the leminehem, the Hebrew form, which is the equivalent of leminam, the regular form, is constructed on the analogy of nouns derived from lamed he stems. Is that not in there?
In this one, it has who as just the ending. It says is a
3ms. Okay, yeah. In the one I printed, I didn't print it out after I added this, but this was from a little note from Casuto's commentary on Genesis. And it should be in the electronic one I sent. But concerning the leminehem, he said the Hebrew form, which is the equivalent of leminam, with the normal ending am, 3mp ending there, is constructed on the analogy of nouns derived from lamed he stems. It nevertheless appears strange at first, since the pronominal suffix, the hem, the them, refers to nefesh chaya, feminine singular, living creature, and therefore we should have expected lamina, her kind. But possibly the suffix, the 3MP suffix, is an agreement by attraction with a number and gender of the preceding word, mayim, waters. Compare 1 Samuel 2:4. The bow of the mighty man is broken, where the word broken agrees in gender and number with kesheth, the feminine singular bow, not with that word, but with giborim, mighty men. So the reason that the suffix there is plural, the laminehem, is very possibly, it's agreeing with mayim, waters, and it got attracted to that gender, even though it's referring back to nefesh chaya, living creature or living soul. So that could be a little bit of a quandary. If you're looking at the hem and thinking this is a 3MP suffix, what is it referring to? What's going on with that? So it is the nefesh chaya that it's referring to, but it's 3MP very possibly because of agreement with mayim, the word right before it, even though that's not what it's modifying. And once in a while in both Greek and Hebrew you do have that attraction like that where something like that happens where the suffix or things change like that.
Is there any exegetical significance to it with the attraction?
I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of. I think it's just if you're translating this, it would just be confusing because you see this plural suffix and it's referring back to the nefesh chaya, and it would look like it doesn't match. So I added the note in after I printed the physical copy, just so you would kind of realize what's going on. But no, I don't think it has any sort of deep significance. Origin, I probably think of something, but yeah. All right, let's identify the accents in this verse.
Okay. Wait, what, verse 21, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Where yivra has a lagerme, which is disjunctive and positive.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Mm-mm. I think you made the boo-boo on that one before too.
It's a munach
Good, munak. How do you know it's munak?
because it doesn't have the line after it.
Good, no line afterwards. Very good. Tov mode.
And then Elohim has a zakef katon,
Mm-hmm.
which is disjunctive and positive. And then Eth had taninim,
Taninim.
Tananim
Good.
is tifcha, disjunctive post-positive.
Well, tifcha isn't post-positive, but tananim does have a tifcha on it. So, and it is disjunctive, but it's not post-positive, it's just impositive.
Okay. And then Hagadolim has the athnak, which is disjunctive and positive. Wa'ath has the munach, which is conjunctive and positive.
How come that eth has an accent, but the eth and eth ha tenanim doesn't?
Because it's connected to had tanim,
Good. With a, what's that line there?
That is makef.
Good. Is a makef, yeah.
Makef.
And the words with a makef are considered as one word for the purpose of accentuation. Okay, good. Keep going.
Kal nefesh is a munak, disjunctive or conjunctive and positive. Hechaya has a legerme, which is a disjunctive and positive.
That actually is a munak followed by a pasek, not logarma, but that's a challenging one to figure out, and I'll explain why at the end.
Okay.
And those pages in Weeks' book kind of explain why, but that one would be without looking at Weeks, you wouldn't know. So logarma would be very easy to see why you would say that, but it's actually munak followed by pasek. But anyway, yeah, and we'll talk about that at the end.
Haromeseth is pazer.
Patzer, yeah.
Pazer. Disjunctive and positive. And then Asher has a talisha katon. Conjunctive post-positive.
Good. I try to ask ones that have a little bit different, like some of those, I don't think, that might be the first time I've asked you about that one, for example.
Okay. It looks like a magnifying glass, like Sherlock Holmes or something.
It does, yeah. And one way you can remember, like the Tilasha Katon and now I'm blanking out. The one is there's the post-positive one, and there's the pre-positive one, and they point the opposite way. And then my mind is blanking out what the other one is. But
it is Talisha Gathola.
Gadol, yeah, that's right. And that's disjunctive and pre-positive, and this one's conjunctive post-positive. I had a way to remember, I was blanking out, but I had a way to remember which is which based on like with a hand of like a clock. So the post-positive one has the hand of the clock here, and the disjunctive one is over here. I guess maybe because you leave when the hand gets to the top of the hour, you leave, so it's a disjunctive if it's this way, while you're in class longer. So if it's conjunctive, it's this way because you haven't got as far. But there may be just an easier way to remember it than that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, okay.
I'm thinking read right to left in Hebrew, so the great one is leaning in from the right into left.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's pre-positive.
Sure.
I don't know how that will help me with disjunctive, conjunctive, but it doesn't have anything to do with clocks. Where are we? Asher. Okay. Sharatsu.
Sharatsu, because where the accent
is Asla.
Good.
Conjunctive and positive.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hameim is Geresh, disjunctive and positive. La Minehem is Ravia, disjunctive and positive. Wa'ath is Azla, conjunctive and positive. Kal-oth is a yativ, disjunctive and positive.
Is yativ in positive?
No, it's not. It's a prepositive.
Yeah, Yathiv is prepositive. And actually, this is a mahupak, which is conjunctive and positive, and we'll explain why at the end. That was a tricky one too, though. It's actually mahupak.
Okay.
This verse had two tricky ones.
So kanaf is a pashta, disjunctive postpositive.
Good.
Laminehu has a zakef katon, disjunctive and positive. Wayer is meraka, conjunctive and positive. Elohim is tifcha, disjunctive and positive. And then kitov is the pesuf sof. Sof pesuk.
Well, the sof pasuk is the two dots. What's the line underneath the taith?
Oh, saluk.
Yeah, that's a saluk. Good. Good. That was good, and that was a challenging verse. Now, the two tricky ones, and they were definitely tricky. How do you know in hachaya haromeseth? You see where that is?
Yep.
How do you know if that's munak followed by pasek just being the line, or the accent lugar meh? Well, the answer is in Weeks's book. If you go to page 129 or 119, you'll see that he tells you that lugar mez take the place of pasek before ravi, the accent ravi. Now here, the accent on the following word is patzer, not ravi. So since the word after this has, where are we here? Yeah, since the word afterwards has the patzer, the ha romeseth, that shows you that it has to be munak followed by pasek. So that's one way to tell, but you wouldn't be expected to know that at this point. That's a pretty technical minor detail for the accents. So one way to tell, though, if you looked on those pages, it would tell you that lugar mez come before a V. Another way to tell, this is the easy way to tell, is on pages 127 through 129, Weeks gives all the verses that have pasek with lugar meh, and Genesis 1:21 is listed as having a pasek. So he gives a list of every single one. He has a list of paseks because they're so easy to confuse with the lugar meh, and he gives a list of every single verse that has a pasek and one that has a lugar meh. And if you look in there, you will see that Genesis 1:21 has a pasek. So that's the easy way to tell. You just look at the list, and he tells you. So that's how you tell. But that was complicated. The other one, on the call oaf, how do you know if it's mahupak or yathiv? Well, mahupak is impositive and yathiv is prepositive, but that's not that conclusive because it looks pretty similar here. Here, the decisive factor is mahupak is the conjunctive accent that serves pashta, and the following word here has a pashta. Yathiv is a substitute for pashta, and so it will not be followed by pashta. So when you find this accent before a word with a pashta, it will almost universally be mahupak and not yathiv. And Weeks explains that on pages 106 and 107. He talks about that as well. And so if you look there, he would tell you that, and all that kind of thing. So those two are very easy to see why you get them confused, but if you looked at Weeks, he would tell you. But if you got them wrong, I mean, very easy to do, not that big of a deal. Totally understandable. Weeks had this interesting note about where the Athnak is in this verse. Where is the Athnak?
It is Hekatholim.
It's on the word Githolim modifying the Tananim, the sea monsters. And this is interesting what he said. He said, occasionally, he said in Genesis 1:21, the Athnak is with Ha-Tananim Hagadholim instead of where you might expect it with Vayar Elohim Kitov. And why? Because these wonderful creatures about which Jewish fable has so much to relate were counted to have nothing in common with the other creatures named. They were beings per se, and so put by themselves at the beginning of the verse. So, in other words, they're cool, and so they have the Athnak separating them from the other ones. So that's kind of interesting, just a little note there. So, and dinosaurs are certainly pretty cool. Just ask kids, about dinosaurs. And their size does make them a marvelous demonstration of divine power. Just think of Job about the behemoth and Leviathan. So they are separated from the other sea creatures with the Athnak. So Matthew Henry said, peculiar mention is made of the great whales, whose bulk and strength, exceeding that of any other animal, are remarkable proofs of the power and greatness of the Creator. So, just a little interesting note on the accent there. It's not possible to say the distinction here is that the great whales are warm-blooded in contrast to other sea creatures, and maybe that's why the Athnak is there. Because other texts with Tananim, if you look them all up, there is not that distinction of like warm-blooded, cold-blooded, if you look at the other Tananim texts. So that's that. Another just unrelated note too. Here he says, God saw that it was good because now the inhabitants of both realms created in day 2 are inhabited. Remember, day 1 and 4 parallel, 2 and 5, and 3 and 6. So here, day 2, he created the sky and the sea, and now the sky and the sea have their inhabitants. So now the creation only lacks the land inhabitants, which will be made on day 6. Any questions on Genesis 1:21?
No, not really.
Okay. See, it's good. When you learn Hebrew, you find out that the Tananim are really cool, and they even are separated by an Athnak.
I remember reading an article by Brian Thomas, and he was commenting on William Cooper's book, Authenticity of Jonah, where he was talking about the Greek word that they use for the big whale, or in Jonah's story. And the classic Greek, they would describe the creature with like a dog head and this and that, which he was kind of indicating it seems like it was more like a dinosaur type creature instead of a whale in the sense, or big fish in that sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it'd be difficult. It's not something we can replicate very easily, so it'd be difficult to say exactly what it was. I don't know what it was, so I'm not going to comment for sure one way or the other. You do have, of course, a lexicon made by somebody that's not a creationist is not going to list dinosaurs as in the category because, of course, they were extinct and so on. But, so I think Tananim would include dinosaurs, but what exactly the critter was that swallowed Jonah, I don't know. I think that it's not the normal Greek word for translating the Tananim, though, in Jonah. It is some other one for like a bigger something, but I don't remember exactly now what it was.
I looked it up one time in the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. I don't remember what it was, but it was something that was interesting.
Yeah, I think it was. Tananim are interesting creatures. All right, let's go to verse 22.
So is it a Tananim that swallowed Jonah? Is that the word used in Jonah?
I believe so.
I was looking up the word for whale from the New Testament.
Yeah, let me see it. I'll just take a quick peek here.
William Cooper was commenting also on the Greek word and the descriptions ancient Greeks gave to it.
Now, it's the New Testament that actually uses the word whale in the King James. The Old Testament has dog gadol. Dog is the word for fish, so it has a great fish that swallowed him up. So you think about dog as usually a fish. So maybe it was more of what we would think of as a whale, based on that. So anyway, All right, let's do the next verse here. Whatever it was not fun, I'm sure, to get swallowed up. Try to avoid. It's something to avoid. In fact, in Jonah chapter 2, preached this not long ago, he says, in the belly of hell cried I. So getting digested by the thing, there's parallels to what people are experiencing in hell. I think that was Jonah was supposed to feel compassion based on his experience there. And I'm sure it actually kind of helped. He probably didn't look that good when he got out, and that probably helped people listen. This guy, he just got spat up. This guy, this great sea creature, spat him out, and he came out alive, and he looked horrible, and he's preaching our city's going to be destroyed in 40 days, man. Oh, this is pretty serious.
Some of the ancient Jewish commentators said that he died and was brought back to life.
Yeah, it doesn't specifically say that in the text, that he died.
Which would be an interesting concept for Christ's parallel.
Yeah, that's true. All right, well, let's do verse 22.
Where Varak, Otham, Elohim, Lamor, Paru, Urvu.
It's pronounced Shua, audible Shua, Uravu.
Wumilu, Eth Hamaim, Bayamim, Wahaof, Yerev, Baaretz.
All right.
Verse 22, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and become many, and fill the waters in the sea, and the birds let multiply in the earth.
All right, pretty good there. Yivarek, I think I gave you that PL, it's wow consecutive 3MS from Barak. And what does Barak mean?
To bless.
Yes, I think that even their president, I think that Barak, I think that's what his name means. So.
In Arabic?
But they're cognate languages.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know Arabic, but I think it's probably, just like Hamas is Hebrew word for violence, and then of course Hamas is the terror group. So they never tell you that, you know what I mean?
Right.
So hi, we're peaceful. Our name means violence. So
It's a peaceful religion, of course.
Yes. So and tribulations are a blessing. So Barak can be a blessing in that sense. So I'll leave Lamor. What is Lamor?
Lamor is infinitive. It's okay. BDB 336 says, after another verb of saying, introducing, things said. So it's a verb.
It's just an infinitive construct.
Okay.
Have we covered the infinitive? I think we covered the infinitive absolute yet. I don't remember now. But anyways, this is infinitive construct. I don't think we have. So lay more. So yeah, it just means saying, to say, and introduces the speech.
I remembered a word in the vocab, and Lambden said, don't translate it.
Oh, well, yeah, he's probably just put quote marks or something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's what he said.
And the King James doesn't use quote marks. Instead, it says saying, and then it puts what it says, because that's what the actual underlying text does. So, say saying, and then the thing is actually just, I'm not saying you're sending if you put quote marks in, but saying, and then the actual thing is what is literally representing what the text says. All right, Peru. What is Peru?
Peru is a verb for be fruitful, para. I have IMV, and I'm trying to think what I...
Imperative.
Okay.
It's an imperative. That's an imperative. You look at the form, too. It's an imperative form. Is it singular, plural, masculine, feminine?
Plural, masculine.
Good, yeah. So it's a cal imperative, masculine, plural, from para, to bear fruit. So here, command to bear fruit, which would be, be fruitful. Pru. Ravu. What is ravu?
Ravu is from ravav, which is an imperative while conversive of masculine plural. To become many, to be many.
What's the form of the wow conversive versus a normal wow?
The form?
Yeah.
A woo instead of wa.
The normal wow, oh, I don't have any markers, so I guess I won't write on the board. But remember, the normal wow is just wow, shawa. The wow conversive is wow, pathak plus doubling. Does this have a wow, pathak plus doubling?
No.
No, it does not. And it's not an imperfect either, it's an imperative. So it's just the cal imperative, masculine, plural. Be fruitful and multiply. It doesn't flip it to anything else. Just as a command, be fruitful and multiply. Same thing with the other one, and fill. Umilu. And that's, again, it's just the cal imperative, masculine, plural. What is mala? Oh, hey, on ravu, the lexical form is, I think you said ravav.
Ravav.
Do you have two baiths as the lexical form, or do you have a hey?
I have two baiths.
Okay, yeah, was that? I think the lexical form is rava. Oh, I see. Let me see here. Kohler-Baumgartner says rava. Says it's rava, and then he says compare one of ravav. So, but it actually is rava here, and I think if you look under rava, you'll probably find it. Rava and BDB is on page 915.
915?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what's this thing doing? Okay, it's good. And then Mala is from Mala with Aleph. Oh, no wonder it's not going back. Mala, that's Mayim. Hamayim is waters. Ba Yamim. What is Yamim?
Seas.
Good, yeah, it's not waters, it's seas. What's the lexical form of that?
Yam.
Yam, good, yam. It's masculine, plural, absolute, noun, sea. Oaf. Yerev, what is Yerev?
Yerev is the 3ms plural Joseph. Joseph.
Yeah, it's a Joseph, it's cal imperfect, 3ms Joseph from Rava. So let become many, become great, ba'aretz, in the earth. We don't have a third person imperative in English, and so let become is, or let multiply or something like that is what we do in English to get the idea. Except, of course, since it's an imperative, it's not like a permissive, it is a command. Like you get the idea if you translate let them multiply, like it's just a permission, but he actually is commanding them to do it. So.
Is this one also Rava? Or?
Yes, Rava. Mm-hmm. Rava. Okay, Tov mode. Any questions about the translation of that verse?
I don't believe so.
Okay. This is the first record of God speaking directly to his creatures, and it's a word of blessing for those that inhabit the sea and the sky. So you had the divine act of naming in the first half of the week, and now we have a divine blessing bestowed directly on the living creatures. And blessing them still has the idea of sovereignty or superiority in the fact that it's God who does the blessing. And so God is blessing them with the privilege of procreation, granting them the right and the privilege to fill up the earth in their realms, the sea and the sky. So we should learn from this that procreation is a blessing from God. The last clause indicates that the birds are to multiply ba'aretz, in the earth. Why are birds multiplying in the earth instead of the air? Well, they don't lay their eggs in the air because they would, fall down. And so the sea creatures reproduce in the sea, and the birds reproduce on the land. And so that's why it mentions that the birds are ba'aretz, in the earth is where they're multiplying, because that's where they lay their eggs. The trees are on the ground or wherever. So here we have a statement of blessing right after creating. So his divine blessing continues his benevolent work in creation. And there's similarity even in the sound, barak and bara, drawing attention to the relationship between his creation, his creating, and his blessing. The blessing of God is one of the unifying themes of Genesis. So here God blesses the animals. In 1:28 he blesses mankind. In 2:3 he blesses the seventh day. He blesses Adam in 5:2, Noah in 9:1, and the patriarchs frequently. So that's a definite theme of Genesis, blessing. It's connected with children frequently, being fruitful, multiplying, blessing them. But all aspects of life can involve God's blessing. Like Deuteronomy 28, it's crops and family and nation all get blessing here. So where we talk about success, they would frequently talk about blessing in the Old Testament, which would be better really than success. So, and good things in our life are always reviewed as a result of divine blessing. So, and God's blessing will bring about the success. It's not just an empty kind of hope-so sort of situation. And you could say that the Genesis develops the fulfillment of divine promises of blessing. Here he blesses the creation. He blesses all of mankind through the seed of Abraham. And in a certain way, when man procreates, it's actually perpetuating God's creative activity in a certain way. So I'm going to read a quote here from Matthew Henry. I had a good quote. He said, "Each day hitherto has produced very noble and excellent beings, which we can never sufficiently admire. But we do not read of the creation of any living creature till the fifth day, of which these verses give us an account. The work of creation not only proceeded gradually from one thing to another, but rose and advanced gradually from that which was less excellent to that which was more so, teaching us to press toward perfection and endeavor that our last works may be our best works." And one more thing that he said is a nice application. He said, "It is a pity that fishing and fowling, recreations innocent in themselves, should ever be abused to divert any from God and their duty, while they are capable of being improved to lead us to the contemplation of the wisdom, power, and goodness of him that made all these things, and to engage us to stand in awe of him, as the fish and fowl do of us." And that's true. People skip church to go fishing, and they should look at the fish and say, "Wow, God is incredible. I should go worship him and not skip church to go fishing." So, all right, that is, let's do verse 23, and then we'll take a break, since that's the end of the fifth day here.
Wayahi Arev, Wayahi Boker, Yom Hamishi.
Chamishi.
Hamishi. Oh, yeah. Which is, and it was evening, and it was morning, day 5th.
Day 5, the fifth day. Yeah, any questions about the translation of that verse?
No.
Yeah, and it was evening, and it was morning, day 5. Good, okay, we'll take a break.
All right, verse 24. Wayomer Elohim Totse Haaretz Nefesh Chaya Lamina Bahema Waramesh Waremes. Okay, yeah. Waheyatho Aretz Lamina Wayahi Cain. Which is to say, and God said, let there come out the earth animated living things towards its kind, and creeping things and living things of earth toward its kind, and it was so.
And again, I think that like to its kind or according to its kind would be superior to towards, for the reasons we mentioned already. Totse, I gave you the parsing, Hifil imperfect, 3 of S, Joseph. What does the lexical form mean? Yatsa.
Wait, what word?
Totse.
Totse. Yatsa is Yotse. Wait, what was the question?
What does the lexical form mean?
Lexical
Yatsa.
form. To cause or cause. To go.
Well, the form on its own is just go. Yatsa is just to go or come, or go out. And in the Hifil, it's causative, so cause to go out, or let the earth bring forth. So bring forth or cause to go out the living creature, the Nefesh Chaya, living soul, according to its kind, Lamina. And there you can see the the feminine singular suffix referring to the Nefesh Chaya. Bahema is, how do you translate Bahema?
Beast, I believe.
Yeah, beast is fine. Remes, the creeping things. I gave you a note on the Wachaya Tho, with that, the O, what's going on with that? Wahikain. So there, concerning the Hayatho, I gave you that note from Gesenius's grammar. And he actually even gave you the translation Chayath, Chayatho Aretz, the beast of the earth. So I'm not going to read the note again because it's right there. You can read the note. Do you have any questions about the translation of verse 24?
I do not think so.
All right. Well, let's translate the text. Critical note. You don't need to read in Hebrew. You can just translate the translate it.
Okay. Other copies and another copy. Other copies Waheyatho. Another copy is Waheyatho Aretz, and Ben Naphtali has Waheyatho Aretz.
Okay. And what's the difference between those different forms?
They had different accent marks on the Waheyatho.
Good, yeah. So the first one, Sepharim Acharim, is the 2-letter abbreviation, which means other copies. And the first one there has no metheg or makef, but instead there's a merakah. And then it says other copies, and I think you skipped the Ben Asher, the Baith / Aleph. That's the noon / Aleph as other copies. Then the Baith / Aleph is Ben Asher. So other copies of Ben Asher have that with no metheg, but then Ben Naphtali has what that last one says. So, and those abbreviations are all in Ginsburg. See how the Ben Asher kind of disappeared?
Yeah, I don't have it in my notes.
Yeah, so other copies of Ben Asher. All right. On verse 24, there's a parallel in verse 24 between Totse Aretz, let the earth bring forth, and verse 12, which also has Watotse Haaretz, let the earth bring forth, from the Hifil of Yatsa. And that underscores the parallel between days 3 and 6. So they're tied together with both having the Watotse Haaretz. The land animals are divided into 3 categories here. You have the behemah, the cattle, the remes, the creeping things, and the chayatho eret, the living creatures of the earth, the wild animals. That's somewhat fluid terminology, but usually the behemah is large domesticated animals, and chayath is wild animals, like non-domesticated critters. So here, the three main groups are domestic animals, wild animals, and small animals. Here, the creeping things would be smaller critters like mice or things that are close to the ground. And I think it's interesting that the threefold division is the relationship to man. So you have domesticated or domesticable animals, non-domesticable animals, wild animals, and small critters, from squirrels to lizards to insects. So, and here also, like the plants in verse 12, here the land animals are said to be produced by the earth, by the power of the Lord. And their bodies, of course, share the same substance as the ground. That couldn't be said for the water, so there was a different form of expression in verse 20, because the sea creatures are not made out of water, but the land animals, same sorts of substances as the earth. Concerning the lamina, with the suffix there, according to her kind, the pronominal suffix, the third person feminine singular suffix, refers to the cattle and the creeping things. So you might have expected a masculine plural suffix instead of the feminine singular a. But the feminine singular suffix would either be attraction to the preceding word sere, which is feminine singular, or the combined phrase chayatho eretz would explain the feminine singular on the second lamina. So there's also a chiastic structure in verse 24 and 25 between the command and fulfillment. And you have the cattle and creeping things as A, then you have the wild animals in B, and you have like B sub 1 wild animals, and then cattle and creeping things, A sub 1. If you compare 24 and 25, you can see that. Did we translate verse 25 yet? No, we didn't. We better translate verse 25. Let's translate verse 25.
So, is the behemoth in Job domesticatable?
Oh, behemah and behemoth are different.
Okay.
That's behemoth is not behemah. Those are different words.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's not just a female plural.
Well,
That's what I was thinking.
go back. Yeah, behemoth is a plural, which would be, I mean, the behemah are often the larger animals. So this one is really large, I think, with the plural. In terms of it being domesticated, I think you would, there's no evidence in the text where it appears that it's domesticable. So I wouldn't conclude that it would be domesticable. And it would be too much of a stretch to say that behemah are often, and remember, these are somewhat overlapping terms. So often, when there's a contrast, behemah is domesticable animals. Therefore, this other word that's not connected to this one must be domesticable. That's kind of stretching it too far, I think. So I don't see any evidence that you can domesticate the behemoth. In fact, I think will kind of undermine the point in Job. So you can try. If you find one, bring it home and try to tie it up or something.
I remember some of the pottery where they have depictions of dinosaurs, and some of which were domesticatable in
Yeah, they
the
could have
sense
been.
of.
I mean, really, some of them were small.
Images of picture writing. Some of them. I don't remember if it was like a sauropod creature or if it was something else. But
Hard to say. Okay, let's translate verse 25.
Where yes, where yet. Where yes, Elohim, eth, chayeth, haaretz, lamina, wa'eth, habahema, lamina, wa'eth, call remes, ha'edama, ha'ethama, ha'adama, laminehu, wayer Elohim ki tov.
All right, what does that mean?
And God made the living things of the earth to its kinds, and the beasts towards its kind, and each creeping thing of the ground to their kinds. And God saw that it was good.
Okay, not bad. On lamina, that's suffix. What kind of suffix is it on lamina? Vaya'as Elohim et chayat ha'aretz lamina.
The suffix
Yeah,
would be lamina, feminine singular.
good. And so you probably wouldn't want to translate it as a plural unless there's a good reason. It's a feminine singular suffix on both the laminas. And laminehu has a third masculine singular suffix. So every creeping thing after its kind versus their kind, I think you said.
Yeah.
So, all right. Waya'as, what is waya'as?
It is conversive of asa, of cal imperfect 3ms apocryphated third hay.
Okay. What's the lexical form?
Asa,
Which means?
to do or make.
Yeah. So it's cal imperfect 3ms with a vowel conversive from asa to do or make. And most of the other words are actually all ones that have showed up before. The wayar, again, is cal imperfect 3ms from ra'ah to see with a vowel conversive on it. So, and God saw implied that it was tov. Good. Ki tov. Any questions about the translation of verse 25?
If it presents a word like in the I think maybe this is why I put in a plural on like kinds. If it's in the sense of collective, would that justify a plurality of it, or?
You might maybe if you translated the noun. I mean, just in terms of English grammar, if you translated the noun as a plural, then you'd want to translate the suffix as a plural, just so that there's agreement in the English. But here you could very well translate the cattle of the earth or the beast of the earth to its kind and keep it singular. Every creeping thing according to its kind. So there's no reason to make any of it plural. So,
Okay.
Any other questions on verse 25?
I don't believe so.
Okay, super. Now here, there isn't a specific record of God blessing the land animals like he does the fish and birds in verse 22 and man in verse 28. That doesn't mean the land animals aren't blessed, like God just doesn't like them, they're not blessed, but just that a specific statement of blessing on them is absent here. Very possible, well, I think because the specific statement of blessing on the 6th day is reserved for man, who's emphasized in this way and in other ways as the culmination of the creation narrative of the first 6 days. And the land animals are under his dominion. So, and really, by blessing man, I think the land animals kind of get into, just like when man sins and then the whole earth comes under the curse and the land animals get affected by it too. So man and the land animals share in common the day of our origin, our creation by God, our habitat, our physical life, and our possession of consciousness, or nephesh. But man is uniquely in God's image and is created by separate and special divine act, unlike the animals. So that's two differences there. Okay, no more questions on verse 26. Let's go, 25, we'll go on to verse 26.
Wayomer Elohim Ne'aseh Atham, Batsail Menu, Keith Muthenu, Kith,
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Ki-
Kith,
Kith,
mu,
Mune,
thay, nu.
Wayir, do, Beeth, Gath, Beethgath, Hayam, Woov Oath, Hashamayim, Woov Bahema, Woov Uvakal, Haaretz, Uvakal, Ha-Remes, Ha-Romes, El Haaretz.
Okay, good. And what does that mean?
And God said, let us make man in our image, as our likeness, and have dominion in the fish of the sea, and in the birds of the heavens, and in the beasts, and in all the earth, and in all the creeping things that creeps upon the earth.
The end there, I think it's probably fine what you said, but since ha-remes is a singular, and so the participle ha-romes is a cal participle, masculine singular absolute, you could say every creeping thing that creeps, just make it all singular, upon the earth. And baith is in, but over is fine too. Over is definitely legitimate. And so here his dominion is over the fish and the fowls and the cattle and all the other critters. All right. I think I asked you about this. Let me see the questions here. Oh, I asked you a category of usage question. Okay, na'aset. Tell me the parsing of na'aset. What is that? Vayomer Elohim na'aset Adam.
It is from asa, to make, nifel. Is that how it's pronounced?
Well, that is actually not a nifal.
No. Okay.
Nifals usually do have the nun at the front, though. But you haven't learned the nifal. And if it was a nifal, I would have given it to you.
Okay, then you didn't give it to me.
No, I don't think I gave you na'asa, did I?
I don't know.
Yiktov, tiktov, tiktov, tiktavi, ektov. Yiktavu, tiktov, na tiktavu, tiktov, na niktov. So one of those forms have a nun at the front?
Niktov.
Niktov does, okay.
Okay, so it would
And you translated it right, too.
So it would be imperfect.
Good.
First person plural.
Good. Yep. The cal, imperfect, first common plural. Although it's actually cohortative, so that first person indirect imperative idea, let us make man. So, but it's not nifal, it's a cal cohortative first common plural. Let us make. Kademuthenu, you could say according to our likeness. I think what you said was fine, but you could also say according to our likeness. Yirdu, what is wayirdu?
It is wow consecutive. Cal imperfect 3ms of rada, meaning to rule.
To rule. Good. Most of that is correct. Notice the wayirdu, that ending, the u. Is that a singular ending?
Did I say singular?
You did.
Okay. I actually have plural in my paper.
Oh, good, because it is plural. Yeah. It's a third masculine plural. Here it's also jussive too. Let them have dominion. So, let us make man with the cohortative, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and the cattle, and over all the earth and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. Any general translation questions on verse 26? I already told you the romace is a cal participle, masculine singular absolute from ramas, to crawl or creep, right at the end of the verse. So hopefully that's what you had. See what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Okay. Any translation questions before we get to the verse questions here?
I don't think so.
Oh, actually, one other thing I needed to point out to you. You said on the yirdu, you said it was a wow conversive, but notice there's not a pathak plus a doubling in the yod on the yirdu. So then this is just a jussive, it's not a normal imperfect, it's a jussive. So it's just continuing the imperatival idea from the cohortative na'asa. So let us make man and let them have dominion. And I think, I have a question specifically about that here. So in Genesis 1:26, specify the category of usage for yirdu. I kind of gave some of the answer away here. In the construction na'asa, yirdu, see Lambden, paragraph 107, pages 118, 119. So what did you say about that?
Cohortative plus imperfect.
Okay.
That's what I wrote.
Take a look on pages 118 to 119 here.
Lambden.
Yep. One strength of Lambden is he does give some basic syntactical stuff like this, which some other grammars don't. And this is nice. So he has these sequences in paragraph 107 involving the imperative, jussive, and cohortative. So you can have an imperative plus imperative sequence. You can have an imperative plus perfect sequence, in which case there's explicit consecution. So do this, and then this, and then this. And if you have an imperative, jussive, or cohortative, followed by an imperative or cohortative, it's a command with a purpose or result. So does this here fit any of those? Does it fit A, B, or C?
C.
Good, it's C. So that we have a cohortative, na'aseh, followed by the imperfect, yirdu. So what would the idea be then? How would you paraphrase the idea of those two verbs then?
It was commanded with a purpose or result.
Good. So let us make man with a result so that they may have dominion. So God is a speaker. In terms of purpose or result, his purpose brings about the result. So they kind of fuse together. So man's dominion is both purpose and result. It's not a purpose that's unfulfilled, a result that's unintended, but it falls in an overlapping category of purpose that takes place. So, but I think the main emphasis, though, is purpose rather than result. It's emphasizing God's intention here. Let us make man for the purpose of him having dominion. Notice also on page 119, right at the end of paragraph 107, it says, know that the conjunction wow has its normal non-converting form here, which we actually pointed out too, that the wow on the yirdu is just the normal form of the wow. So it's good that Lambda points out those things. Gesenius in paragraph 109 in his grammar talks about this as well, as it's an intention or an assurance of a contingent occurrence, is the way that Gesenius puts it. So let us make man with a result, or let's make man for the purpose of him having dominion. So that's what we're here for. One reason at least. All right, next question. Any questions on that question?
No.
Now we have a theologically significant question. Pars batsalmenu and kadumuthenu explain the theological significance of the suffixes. And I give you some other verses where there are these plural suffixes for God, and some other verses where it looks like there's plurality in God. And then we have to explain these plural suffixes in connection with the number of the verb na'aseh. And we should consider that standard Hebrew grammar, like Ya'un Muraoka, who are not crazy fundamentalists by any means, because I think actually if you don't listen to God's word, you are crazy, but leave that aside. But consider that the we of majesty does not exist in Hebrew. So he says this plural of majesty is actually non-extant. We can't explain this by plural of majesty because that actually doesn't exist in biblical Hebrew. And then another writer here, that is a plural of majesty or intensification does arguably occur in Hebrew with nouns, but not with pronouns. Pronouns are always countable plurals. For this reason, grammatically, the us, let us, cannot be a plural of majesty or intensification, according to Waltke's commentary there. So then is the plural a reference to God and the angels, to the Trinity, or to something else? But before we answer that, we have to do the parsing. So pars batsalmenu and kademuthenu.
Okay, what was the first one?
Batsalmenu. Vayomer Elohim na'aseh Adam batsalmenu.
Okay. It is our likeness from Dama.
Oh, that's the next word. Okay. Kademuthenu, likeness.
Is that wrong? Oh,
Yeah, I asked about sound. That's fine. We'll do demuthenu. So, okay. So what's the lexical form there?
that is a noun, feminine, first person plural.
Well, you don't do that with nouns like with verbs.
Okay.
It's just a feminine singular noun.
Feminine singular.
Yeah, it's just a feminine singular noun, the construct actually. But so it's from, what's the lexical form?
Lexical form is Dama.
It's demuth.
Demuth.
Yeah. It's page, I'll tell you what page it is in BDB. Yeah, it's page 198. Demuth, likeness, similitude. Feminine noun. And then, of course, there's the ka prefix, like or as, and the anu suffix, the first common plural suffix.
I actually got page 198 from BDB, cited likeness, similitude, or external appearance of son in likeness of father, so also of man in likeness of God.
Okay. Okay, so BDB,
So
of course,
Dama.
thinks that this is the external appearance. So God has a body, and man has a body as well. That's what BDB apparently thinks is going on here. And that is, well, of course, that's what I guess the P document says that or something. So yeah, you have to be, some of his interpretive ideas are going to be a little bit wacky, of course, but that is a decent definition of demuth as likeness, appearance, and so on. So I don't believe that it's because God has a body and man does too. Yeah, I think it's definitely not the idea. But kaf is like or as, and then they have the suffix. How about batsalmenu?
Batsalmenu is prefix with ba, and it noun, masculine, singular.
Good. It's masculine singular noun. What's the lexical form?
Stellam.
Tell. Good. And what does it mean?
image.
Sure, image. So, but salmenu kudemuthenu, image and likeness. All right, tov ma'od. So what's going on with this plurality here? I mean, maybe this is a remnant of polytheism that was not removed by the redactors of the Pentateuch. Or maybe God is speaking to the angels. It's not. It's interesting that the plural of majesty idea was used by older anti-Trinitarian authors, but actually even modern theological liberals don't use the plural of majesty anymore because they recognize it doesn't actually exist with the pronouns. So they've actually given up the plural of majesty idea. If somebody says this is plural of majesty, he's actually behind the times even of liberal scholarship.
Okay. So my response was, some of the ancient rabbis claimed he spoke to the dirt. It could not be it would be hard to interpret angels since they have not yet been mentioned in the text or immediate context, so that would not be a natural interpretation. In 26, let us make is first person, plural in our image, first masculine plural, and our likeness is reiterated in verse 27, and he created 3ms, and he created 3ms suggests the only grammatical interpretation is to a Trinitarian God creating and speaking to himself, identified in as, I think I wrote as, maybe the first person plural pronoun.
Okay, so not the angels because they aren't mentioned. That is certainly worth considering. A lot of the modern liberals say there's this heavenly court and God is speaking to the heavenly court. Are we in the image of the angels anywhere? Is man in the image of God and of the angels?
Well, angels do look like men when they have an appearance.
They do. They do appear like men. That's true. But the Bible never says we're made in the image of angels. So another problem with saying that it's the angels who he's speaking to is then we'd be in the image of God and of the angels. And this Bible repeatedly speaks about man as the image of God, not as the image of angels. So the angel idea, one, like you mentioned, they're not mentioned in the context anywhere. And two, it would really, you'd have to make the angels then the creator too in the next verse. There's a lot of problems with it being the angels. It would actually detract as well from the emphasis here about, God's uniquely making man, that he's consulting with, this heavenly court or whatever is not. It's basically a way to get out of the Trinitarian view, really. Since there is no plural of majesty with the pronouns, a text like Genesis 1:26 is a stronger Trinitarian passage than simply the plural like Elohim. While Elohim as plural is suggestive of the Trinity, the case is not as strong as the pronouns, because here the pronouns, there is no plural of majesty with them, while you could at least argue it for the nouns. So this is more of a problem for a non-Trinitarian. The view that it's the angels goes back to Philo, at least. The view that it's Trinitarian goes back to the earliest post-New Testament literature that we are aware of, like the Epistle of Barnabas and Justin Martyr. Both say this is Trinitarian. So I'll read you what the Epistle of Barnabas says. It's interesting. It says, "For the Scripture speaks about us when he says to the Son, 'Let us make humankind according to our image and likeness, and let them rule over the beasts of the earth and the birds of the air and the fish of the sea.' And when he said that our creation was good, the Lord said, 'Increase and multiply and fill the earth.' These things he said to the Son." So the Epistle of Barnabas says that the us is the Father speaking to the Son. So, and we are made in the image of God alone.
It must be one of the very few times Barnabas uses a grammatical historical interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, Barnabas has definite problems. I mean, we're not. The Epistle of Barnabas is a problematic document.
It's a fun read, though.
Yeah, and of course we don't even know its textual history is quite uncertain too. But anyway, this is the very early Christian interpretation, at least, was that if the Epistle of Barnabas is even truly Christian at all, not heretical, but at least you can see this very early interpretation anyway. And man's not an image of angels, but he's an image of likeness of God. 2 verse 27 is explicit on this, as is 2:7. Also, both 1:27 and chapter 5, 1 and 2 emphasize this making of man as a creation. It's bara in the singular. So the one who is in the singular refers to himself in verse 27, also refers to himself as a plurality in verse 26. And bara, as we know, is only used of the action of God, not of any created being. Only God does bara, so that kind of gets the angels out. Furthermore, the idea that God takes counsel with angels is rejected in Isaiah 40:13 and 14, where it says, speaking about God here, who being his counselor hath taught him, with whom took he counsel? So God doesn't have to take counsel with anybody here. Isaiah 40:13 and 14 kind of undermines this taking counsel with angels idea.
Isaiah
30. 40:13 and 14. And also 44:24 says that God alone, he spread abroad the earth by himself. So the angels helping with the creation is really undermined. 44:24 and Nehemiah 9:6 actually. So it's not the angels, it would be Trinitarian. The Spirit of God is actually mentioned in chapter 1 and verse 2. Some actual commentators who aren't willing to say it's the Trinity say it's God speaking to the Holy Spirit mentioned in verse 2, which is kind of interesting. I think it is the whole Trinity, but you do actually even have a specific other person mentioned in this chapter. In Proverbs 8, of course, God's wisdom, pre-incarnate Christ, is involved in the creation in Proverbs 8. So you have the Spirit in verse 2 here. You have Proverbs 8, you have the wisdom of God as creator. And some of those other references also in Genesis itself, you have Trinitarian passages as well. Like in Genesis 11, Jehovah is an us. Jehovah goes down to judge Sodom and Gomorrah. If you compare 11:5 through 7 with 18:21, and then you have this divine person in Genesis 18 and 19 who's recognized as God, delivers Lot, who's a visible person with these two angels with him. You see distinction of persons in 19:24 in Genesis, and 48:15 and 16. You have the angel of Jehovah equal with God as the Redeemer. So in multiple places in Genesis, you have a co-equal deity of Father and Son. And John 5:19, of course, indicates the Father and Son both work together in every divine work. The Father works hitherto and I work, so they're both working. Job 33:4 mentions the Spirit as the Creator. So a co-working and co-counsel. And the reason that it's mentioned, the Trinitarian persons are mentioned, is because of the importance of creating man in his image and likeness. So I'm going to read you what the Targum Neophyte says on Genesis 1:26-28. It's kind of interesting. It says, "Then the Lord said, let us create man in our image, similar to us, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Then the word of the Lord created mankind in his image. In an image from before the Lord he created him. Male and his partner he created them. Then the glory of the Lord blessed them, and the word of the Lord said to them, be strong and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of heaven and over all the animals that creep on the earth." So you have in the Targums and in ancient Judaism this idea of the word or glory of the Lord interposing between God and the creation. And that, I think, actually is reflected in John 1 with the mention of the Word. The Son is the Word. So I'm going to read you a quote summarizing the evidence for the Trinitarian view of Genesis 1:26. "The first thing that strikes us as we look at 1:26 that the main verb is in the plural. Many scholars have attempted to explain this plural. Some call it a plural of majesty, an unlikely possibility since such a plural is not found elsewhere in Scripture. Others have suggested that God is here addressing the angels. We must also reject this interpretation, since God is never said to take counsel with angels who, themselves creatures, cannot create man, and since man is not made in the likeness of angels. Note, e.g., what is said about God in Isaiah 40:14, with whom took he counsel. Note, too, that Genesis 3:21 also refers to God in the plural, where angels are obviously excluded. The man has now become like one of us. Rather, we should interpret the plural as indicating that God does not exist as a solitary being, but as a being in fellowship, a plurality." So that was from Created in God's Image by Hoekema. A few other things interesting here. There's the impersonal let there be in the 7 preceding creative acts is replaced by a personal let us. So you had let there be light, let there be this. You have a personal let us. And only with the creation of man is the divine intent announced beforehand. So you have this announcement, intention, and then he does it. And it was so is replaced by a threefold blessing on man. And in those ways, mankind is placed closer to God than the creation in general. It's interesting that in ancient Near Eastern texts, only the king is the image of God. So the king, because he's really cool, he's actually a divine being. He's the image of God, but not everybody. Everybody's not, just the king. But here in the Bible, all man are the image of God, which of course is going to lead as significant even political implications versus only the king versus everybody is. So, and the addition of likeness to image shows that humanity is like God, but he's also distinct from him too. If it just said image, you might think that man is somehow divine, but he's both the image, so there's this connection, but there's also this diversity. He's a likeness. He's not God. He's a likeness. So the image of the deity was equated with the deity itself in the ancient Near East, but likeness serves to distinguish God from man. So the use of both terms together show that man is both like God and also unlike God. And using only one, I think, would leave it somewhat less clear. So, boy, we have one more. Let's answer this one more question here, and we'll wrap up with verse 26 today. So, last question here. Genesis 1:26-27, compare 5:3-9-6, calls man the image of God. Compare James 3:9. The New Testament affirms that Christians have put on the new man, and this new man is being renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him. That's one reason why the image isn't physical, like God is a body or whatever, because there's a progressive renewal into the image, and our bodies aren't slowly becoming more like God's body or something. So that doesn't work. You have a question, or you're just blocking the sunlight? Okay, yeah, some of the sun can be interesting. So the luminary is working. So anyway, so this new man is being renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him. Colossians 3:10, compare Ephesians 4:24. A process completed in the eschaton, 1 Corinthians 15:49. It also affirms that Christ is the image of the invisible God. Colossians 1:15, compare Romans 8:29, 2 Corinthians 4:4, Hebrews 2:5-13, Psalm 8. How are the biblical statements related about Christ as the image of God, regenerate man is the image of God, and all mankind is the image of God? So how does that work? Christ's image, regenerate man is image, all mankind is image. What's going on?
Some of these questions deserve like 10-page essays. And so I tried to sum it up in a paragraph.
Okay, that's good. See, but this is the interesting part. See?
Yeah. But it's hard to sum it up.
Yeah, okay, that's true.
The image of God in mankind at large is expressed in the personhood, as God is a personal being with an everlasting existence, heaven or hell, consciousness, but is marred by sin. The Christian is waiting for the redemption of the body, as Romans 8:23, which is being conformed to the image of his Son, Romans 8:29, who is the last Adam, 1 Corinthians 15:45, as representing the perfect man without sin, which Christians will receive as the glorified body. So did that answer all the questions?
Okay, I think so. Decent answer. So, I think that Christ, there's different uses of image. Like Hebrews 1:13, it says he's the express image of his person. So Christ is like God in the fullest extent in his divine nature. So as the eternal Son, he's God's image, and the brightness of his glory, express image of his person, so that when you see Christ, you've seen the Father. I think that man is in the image of God, and I think there is some reference to Christ as image here. Christ as, there is some reference to that, I think. One kind of interesting parallel, Exodus 25:9-40 mentions the earthly tabernacles modeled on the heavenly. It's an image of the heavenly, which may tell us something useful there. So I think that there is some reference to Christ as the ultimate image, with man being image of God. Now, man in general is like him in a number of ways. There's a broader sense of image in which all men, even after the fall, have the image. That broader sense includes morality, spirituality, the ability to relate to God, a sense of right and wrong, intelligence, not just the ability to communicate, but to understand the things of God, which is one reason why, like, if people say, well, God's so unknowable, well, since we're in his image, we actually can't understand things about him, and we can understand his revelation because we're his image. and personality. We can communicate and so on. So that's part of the broader image. And I think even language. We can convey genuine propositional truth about God and think true thoughts about God as his image. So we actually can. Scripture is sufficient to actually convey real, accurate information about God. And so God is noble because we're in his image. And I think there's a dominion aspect too. Because we're in his image, we're able to function as one who can act for God, rule for God over the earth, display the communicable attributes of God in the creation, holiness, righteousness, rule. So I think that's all kind of involved in a broad sense of image. Christ had all that was involved in that broader sense of image to the highest degree. Perfect morality, perfect spirituality, perfect communion with God, perfect ability to exercise his will, perfect rule over creation, the second coming. So he perfectly manifests the image of God as man, as well as perfectly having the image as God, as being the express image of his person as both God and man. So that's broad. Narrower sense of image is righteousness and the true holiness, like Ephesians 4 mentions. That narrower sense of image was lost to fallen man. So man lost the image in the sense of righteousness and holiness. And actually, it's interesting. In the fall, man sinned because he wanted to be like God, but as God's image, he already was like God in every way that was good. He already was like him. He was already in his image. He had that holiness and righteousness, and he lost that because of a desire to be like God in a wrong way. So the image in the narrower sense is restored in regeneration. You get it back, righteousness and true holiness. It's increased in progressive sanctification, and it's culminated in glorification. That's what that progressive idea in Colossians 3, we're being conformed to his image. And so when Christ brings many sons to glory, we'll be like him, for we will see him as he is. We'll perfectly bear the divine image in the narrow sense again, 1 John 3:2. He's a second Adam. We're under him. We're like him. So as true God and true man and as one person, he perfectly bears the eternal divine image as the image of God, his son, and perfectly bears the image of God in the sense that man will have it in both a narrow and broad sense, as second Adam and the perfect mediator. And so he's perfectly fit to restore the lost image to us in the narrow sense. So I think all of that is involved in that. And there is certainly a lot to develop in that, more than we have time to say here. Some things we can learn from that is we should consider the privilege and honor of being like Christ very great. We ought to be amazed. We get to be like Jesus Christ. This is incredible. What a privilege. What an honor. And we ought to glorify God for his grace in redeeming us. We threw this image away and rebelled. But Christ took our sin up for us so that we could have that image restored in the new birth. I mean, that's incredible. And we ought to pursue holiness, for holiness is Christ-likeness. We actually are becoming more like God. What an incredible blessing. What a privilege. And we also ought to long for heaven because that image will be perfectly restored there. So we ought to long for heaven, long for the coming of Christ, and we'll have that perfect image restored. And also sin is exacerbated by the fact that man is in God's image. So here we're his image. We owe everything to him, and we're taking this image and defiling it with sin. This is a terrible, terrible thing. This should affect how we view our neighbor. We have to love our neighbor because our neighbor is in the image of God in that broad sense. Even if he's unsaved, we have to love and respect that neighbor as one who images God. And the fellow child of God, who has both the narrow and the broad image, we ought to love him and respect him all the more. So those are some things about that. I'm going to read a little bit, so we're theomorphic, you could say, in a certain sense. And we have that ability to make decisions as well. We're not God, of course, we're just in his image. We have that function of rule underneath Christ as well, that ruling ability because we're in the image. So those are some things about the image. A few final notes on 126 here. On the why year do. Well, any other comments, questions on the image? No. There's certainly a lot. Whole books on anthropology about that, but what a blessing. On the why year do, it just has the normal wow with the schwa, as we mentioned there already. In 26 through 30, there's a development here. There's kind of slowing down. You have the announcement of God's intention to make man, the purpose of his creation to rule in verse 26. Then in verse 27, you have the actual creation. Then you have blessing on man in verse 28, the assignment of food to man in verse 29, and in 30, the animals are stuck in two. So, Adam here is man generally distinct from the animals. It's related to Adamah, the word ground. Ish generally distinguishes man from woman. Man is Ish, woman is Isha, man versus woman. Adam is man versus the animals. So, and then in conclusion, I'm going to read you a nice quote from Johannes Brenz. He had this quote on God's hospitality. Even if humans are the most eminent of all the animals, they were nonetheless created by God last of all. But this was not done apart from God's deliberate plan. Indeed, once God had decided to make heaven and earth and all that is in them for the sake of humankind, it was fitting that before humans were created, guest quarters should be readied for them and fitted with every kind of furnishing. We are accustomed, when we have invited a worthy guest to our home, to furnish the house in order to receive that guest in a worthy manner. It is a sluggish householder who only begins to decorate the house when an invited guest has already arrived. But the Lord our God is the best and most prudent head of his household. So when he was going to create humans in his image, whom he would cause to share in his own blessedness, he wished to prepare beforehand a lodging filled with all kinds of good things, so that humans would recognize the majesty, power, wisdom, and goodness of the Creator God, and by that recognition take hold of the highest delight and blessedness. The human mind cannot grasp, nor can the human tongue explain how much joy, gladness, and delight would have flooded over Adam when, fresh from being created, he suddenly saw heaven and earth, that is, his guest quarters, so lavishly decorated and adorned. Certainly nothing could have kept him from admiring his loving Creator with his whole heart. I just thought that was a good quote, a good place to end for today. So I guess we will have to finish this up, Lord willing, next time. We're almost done here with Genesis 1, and that will be really good. So let's go ahead and read number 6, unless you have anything else you want to say about that. Let that truth about God being in his image, let it affect your life, so that you are more holy as well as better at Hebrew as a result of this class. So why don't you read verse 24, I'll read 25, and then you read 26.
Yavarekeka Yahoah Wayish Mareka.
Ya'er Yehovah panai ve'elecha vihuneka.
Yisha
Yisa.
Yasa Yahoah Panaiv Eleika Wayasem Laka Shalom.
Amen. All right. Great. Hallelujah.